Do you enjoy making Halloween cards? Do you like making shaker cards? Well, today is a little bit of both. I, for one, am a super fan of making Halloween cards. I don't know if it's because of the cute images or maybe because I really get to go all out on my ink blending. But today is going to be a Halloween shaker card. I'm starting off with a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock that is 80 pound, and I'm using this Storybook 1 die from Pretty Pink Posh. I'm going to place that onto my cardstock, kind of in the center, just making sure my margins are even on the sides. I'm going to hold that down with a low tack tape and die cut this out. So I have this really fun window panel on the front of my card. Now, my die cutting machine left a few marks, so I'm just going to buff that out with a bone folder. I'm going to move on to my ink blending for a background behind that window scene. So once again, I'm using 80-pound white cardstock, and here I have shaded lilac distress oxide ink that I'm blending at the very top. Then I'm going to come in with spun sugar, add that layer of color, kind of blending into that light purple, and I'm going to bring in my front panel just to make sure I'm having full coverage behind that window. So I need to go down just a little bit further. This background is going to be pretty tame compared to some of the other Halloween cards that I'm going to be sharing later on in the week and next week, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I'm going to double check my blending with my front panel. Everything is covered in the background, so now I'm going to move on to adding some stars to this front panel. So I'm placing the starry background stencil over that window panel, and I'm going to hold the stencil down with my Make Art Station magnets. Now I'm bringing in Gold Glitz Glitter Gel, and I am just using a spatula to spread this Gold Glitz Glitter Gel all over the front of the card. I want to make sure I'm covering every star over the front of that and then just kind of scraping off the excess. As long as you don't have too much of this Glitz Glitter Gel on there, it's going to dry fairly quick. Then I'll remove the stencil and I'm going to wash this off in my sink right away because you don't want this to dry on your stencil. And I wipe up my mat or my surface with a baby wipe. I'm going to add a little bit of interest to my blended background. So I place this inside of my splat box and I'm adding a little bit of Copic white onto my glass work surface. I'm also going to add a couple drops of water and mix these together with my paintbrush, then splatter this all over the background. I really don't need to add a lot because I am going to add some shaker bits, but I wanted to add just a little bit of something to that background. And then I'm going to set this off on the side to dry and work on some images for the front of my card. This is the Ghost Friends stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh. I think these guys are super adorable. There are 5 of them, so I'm going to stamp them all out in jet black ink, which is an alcohol ink marker friendly ink. And I definitely don't use all of them, but I am going to save the rest of these for later for another project. So I'm inking these up really well and stamping these down onto 80-pound white cardstock to make sure I have a really nice crisp line. I am going to stamp it twice. For the coloring of these images, I'm going to do some really light coloring on this. And if you notice, I'm not saying Copic markers. And the reason for that is I'm showing you something a little different today. These are the OLO markers that I just got the day I was filming this video. So these are alcohol ink markers, very, very similar to Copic markers. And yes, I did splurge and invest in them. I'm not going to go in complete detail about the markers, but I will give you kind of a brief on why I decided to invest in them. One of the main reasons is the barrel in which the ink is contained. In Copic markers, there's some sort of like, I don't know exact specifics, but there's like some sort of foam or something in the inside that a lot of ink is absorbed into. And in the OLO markers, it is just a barrel of ink. So you are getting your full value of ink. Another thing that really intrigued me was that your tips will not crystallize. I have so many Copic marker tips that form those little crystals, they get really hard. I'm constantly investing in new tips for my Copic markers. Now, mind you, I have had Copic markers and I still have them for well over 10 years. So they have definitely gotten their money's worth. But I decided to try these because I liked the improvements that this company made to the alcohol markers. Now, there's not as huge of a selection of markers as there are Copic markers right now, but that is also another reason why I decided to invest, as it's easier for me to jump into it kind of in the beginning versus trying to acquire this huge collection. So I will be using these periodically throughout my videos. After I have all of these ghosts colored in, I'm going to take the coordinating die, line them up, and hold them down with a low-tack tape and die cut these. Then I'm going to bring in all of the components for my card front. So this is how I want everything to look. I'm going to take that boo word and I'm going to die cut that from some black cardstock and also black glitter cardstock. To create my shaker, I took a piece of acetate and cut it to just a little bit smaller than my front panel, and then I'm lining the very edges of it with a double-sided tape. I'm also going to add a little bit of liquid glue to those inside window panes to make sure that they stick down. And then I'll remove the backing of that double-sided tape, and I'm going to place this on the back side of my front panel. So this is going to kind of create that barrier for our shaker card. Next, I'll take some double-sided foam tape and I'm going to line the entire back around the window with that foam. I'm only going to do one layer. Normally, I layer it up and do 2 layers, but I'm really not looking for it to be a full shaker card. I just kind of wanted to have that effect of a window shaker with a little bit of decoration in the window. So for that, I'm using these iridescent mini circles. So these are super, super thin, which is another reason why I didn't need to double up the foam tape. I knew I was going to have something really thin. So I added those to the well of my shaker. Now I took some Post-it tape and I taped down the corners of my card front before I started removing the backing of that double-sided foam. And the reason for that is because when you remove the backing of that double-sided foam tape, it likes to try and curl up your card. And this just helps keep it flat so that I can place my back panel over the top of that. And it's really easy afterwards to just pick up that Post-it tape and remove that. So now I have my shaker card. You can see it doesn't have a ton of shake to it, and that is exactly what I wanted. So now I can start working on the rest of my card front, kind of placing my ghosts back on the front panel, make sure everything is going to fit where I want it to. So I added foam squares behind the ghosts, and I'm going to remove the backing of those foam squares and add those around the card front. So I did 3 ghosts kind of kitty corner from each other, forming that visual triangle like we would with embellishments. I had layered up the die cut word boo with 2 layers of black cardstock and topped it off with that black glitter cardstock, and then added that to the front of the card with my liquid glue and tweezers. So that's going to finish up my Halloween shaker card. I really love this. I love the subtleness of that background. I think that iridescent mini circles really brings some sparkle and shine to the front of the card. I will have all of my supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you're notified when new videos are posted.